As the two of them walk away from the area, Strike randomly thinks that as great as Robin is, she's nothing in comparison to Charlotte, which is such a random thought that came out of nowhere. Not once this entire chapter was Charlotte ever mentioned, even in passing, except for right now, for some unholy reason. Hello and welcome to Precontation Point's video Snark. If you came here because you thought that this was an audiobook, please stick around and maybe learn some reading and listening comprehension skills. I read books, discuss what went wrong, and how they can possibly be fixed. I'm continuing my read-through of The Cuckoo's Calling by Robert Galbraith. Not the first video, go check out the others, links are posted below. This book contains harsh scenes that some people might find upsetting. Viewer discretion is advised. Part 2. Now, this is the thing that's seriously starting to piss me off, because normally I'd say Chapter 8, right? Because that's a number that should logically follow Chapter 7. Should logically follow. Instead, every new part in this book, the numbering system starts all over again. So this is technically Part 2, Chapter 1. But, for the sake of my sanity, Chapter 8. With all the gallons of newsprint and hours of televised talk that have been poured forth on the subject of Lula Landry's death, rarely has the question been asked, why do we care? For sure that I've been around the true crime fandom enough to tell you that there are enough people out there who'd care about Lula even if she was an accountant from Leeds. People love a good mystery. The fact that there's so much drama and mystery around her death only makes it that much more interesting. Granted, if Lula really was an accountant from Leeds, I doubt that she would have gotten anything more than a little blurb the morning after it happened. But then again, if she wasn't a famous celebrity known for doing drugs and dating a known drug dealer, the police might have taken her death a little bit more seriously. She was black, too, or rather a delicious shade of cafe au lait. Can why not? Our disproportionate interest, if engraved, bears examination. I'm not saying that the writer of this article is wrong. All I'm saying is that they could have made their social commentary about Kim Kardashian and not decided to mock the death of somebody. Anyway, all of this is from an article Robin is reading out loud to Strike as he works on labeling some things on the Lula case. However, it's less commentary about Lula's death and more a snide commentary about celebrity veneration, which, as I mentioned, isn't so much wrong as it is distastefully timed. As the article starts to talk about catching one mourner at Lula's funeral who said that she was Lula's friend from rehab, Strike asks if this friend was named in the article. Robin says no and asks if the friend could be important. Strike says that it could be interesting to talk to somebody who knew Lula from rehab rather than a club. The narration then pauses to explain that, for lack of anything better to have her do, Strike had asked her to find some articles online and read them to him. It also explains that, in order to try and make things less weird between them, he pretended to notice her engagement ring for the first time. Robin then pulls up some photos from the funeral. It's basically a who's who of British celebrities, or at least fictional celebrities anyway. Stuck in between a famous fashion designer and Lula's boyfriend or her actual family, like they're unimportant or something. They both pause over a photo of the flowers, which have a note saying that they're from DB Mac, the rapper who was staying in her building. Robin says that he's mentioned her a couple of times in some of his songs, but is quick to say that she's hardly a fan. She simply remembers things. Robin then pulls up an interview DB gave about Lula's death. He mainly says about how messed up the entire thing is, and then gets angry when the interviewer makes a comment about her falling past your window, because that implies he'd been there when it had happened. But Strike is quite struck by something DB said. The motherfucking press chased her out that window. However, this line of thinking goes flying out the window when Charlotte texts him that she'll be gone from the flat tomorrow morning and encourages Strike to come by then to collect his things. This is barely a side note, and Robin is quick to distract him with a piece about Lula's biological mother. As you might have guessed by the comment in the chapter's opening line about Lula's skin color, this article is quick to lean on the interracial relationship between Lula's biological parents. The neighbors seem to think that Lula's biomom was some kind of woman of the night, and thought that there was no way she knew who Lula's father was. But then Robin says that this was written before Lula died, right after Lula had a reunion with her biomom. Chapter 9. Strike takes Robin out to the spot where the security footage captured the man running away from the general area of Lula's building 12 minutes after her fall. They walk without literally any sort of dialogue for nearly 3 pages. As they're going, Strike thinks things through. First, he outright dismisses the notion of ever getting a good ID from the CCTV footage. It's mainly too grainy, and no amount of enhancement is going to force a recognizable face out. Then he starts thinking about the article that Robin had found about Lula's biomom. Strike wonders if in uncovering the truth about her origins, Lula kicked the proverbial hornet's nest that wound up with her being pushed over the balcony. They eventually come to Lula's building, which has gone back to normal now that nobody cares about her death anymore. Strike eyes up the building and says that it's probably about a 40-foot drop. Please note that the book itself uses feet. I didn't translate that into American. Robin is flabbergasted when he says that you could easily survive that. This prompts Strike to go on and say that he met a man who got blown off a building the same height, needed a long hospital stay, but he's still alive today. Shrek makes note of the keypad on the door and the camera just above it. John never mentions either of those, so Shrek thinks that they're new. He then contemplates that the area is the kind of neighborhood where oil barons would live, so why had a 23-year-old girl whose main hobby was partying choose to live here of all places? Barristow thinks someone got in and out that night undetected. If they did, says Strike, eyes still on the door, it was planned and planned well. Nobody could have gotten past the photographers, a keypad, a security guard, and a closed inner door, and out again on luck alone. Thing is, he scratched his chin, that degree of premeditation doesn't fit with such a slapdash murder. He goes on to say that pushing somebody over a balcony is one of those heat of the moment kind of murders, which obviously doesn't mesh with what he said a moment ago. Robin says that somebody could have been already inside the building, which is true. Strike says that it opens up the possibility that the doorman or another resident did it, or the idea that an unknown person got in much earlier and simply waited for the moment to hurt Lula. But, as mentioned, Strike thinks that it's a possibility that Lula could have survived the fall. And there's the thought that pushing somebody over a balcony as a means of death is hardly the same kind of vibe as waiting around for hours for the victim to come home. Strike also thinks about one of the neighbors, a film producer who was asleep when Lula fell. Since he's a resident, he's kind of now a suspect. However, the man's wife insists that he was asleep when it happened. But that's not exactly a compelling alibi, especially since said wife has already been established to have been high during the time. Robin asks why the person chose to have an argument with Lula in the middle of the night, and if the downstairs neighbor, Tansy, had done it, why had she then run downstairs to alert the security about Lula's fall? Simply reporting the crime hardly excuses her from the suspect pool. Shrek adds that if the doorman was ill and had left his post, how would anybody have known? The only way to see inside would be to open the door. Herman points out that you need to know the code to get into the door, but Shrek says that it's not exactly compelling evidence. Unless it's changed often, plenty of people would know the code. They walk along an alley and eventually reach the back of the building where Lula lived. Shrek then jumps up onto the wall where he can see into the back gardens of some of the rich people's houses. But he eventually decides that anybody who would try to attempt to get in this way would need a ladder or at the least a friend to hoist him up and over. As the two of them walk away from the area, Strike randomly thinks that as great as Robin is, she's nothing in comparison to Charlotte, which is such a random thought that came out of nowhere. Not once this entire chapter was Charlotte ever mentioned, even in passing, except for right now, for some unholy reason. Chapter 10. Later, Robin and her fiancé Matthew get into a row over what she'd done on her second day of work. He doesn't think that Googling somebody counts as actual detective work and scoffs over the idea of Strike sleeping in his office. Robin obviously wants to defend her new boss since at least the work is interesting, but she also kind of admits that Googling somebody does seem a lot like busy work. Although I'd also like to add, how else are you supposed to get info, especially for somebody whose life was so publicly followed? The entire thing is honestly more than a little silly. Yes, detectives should have sources other than Google and to do stuff in the real world, but knowing basic info about the subject goes a long way in helping the detective, even if that info is speculative hogwash from the Daily Mail. Matthew is quick to try and make up to Robin after she storms out of the room, and then that's it. This chapter was 2 pages of pointless filler. The chapter ends on this note. There was, she noticed, a fragment of frozen pea caught in the setting of her engagement ring. I can't decide if this is some sort of significant metaphor or more of the author's insistence on including the most random and unnecessary descriptions imaginable. Chapter 11. The next day, Shrek goes to Charlotte's flat to collect his things as instructed. He half expected for her to be there, but the only thing he found was 4 boxes of his stuff sitting in the middle of the front room. As he rummages through to ensure that nothing is broken or otherwise destroyed, he laments that his entire life fits into 4 boxes, that most people his age have expensive items such as washers or cars. He has 4 boxes of random odds and ends. He goes into the other room where he's disappointed to find that Charlotte's replaced photos of them with one of her dead father. The narration then explains to us that Charlotte's family is filthy rich, the kind of rich who get portraits of their children done. This is explained to us by having the portrait of 18-year-old Charlotte's eyes following Strike around the room in the creepiest way possible. Strike looks around the flat for anything that she might have missed, but that really is all of his personal items in those 4 boxes. As he stops and stares at his reflection in the mirror by the front door, he thinks that this is it. This is probably the last time he's going to see Charlotte. Thanks for listening to my book Snark on YouTube. New videos are up every Monday, but stick around because I sometimes drop random videos on other days too. Just as a reminder, even if you can't financially support me, there are other ways to help me out. The first is watching this video as well as all my other videos. It's also important to like and subscribe. Finally, you can share this video with all of your friends so that they can help as well. If you're already caught up with all of my videos, you can go to Tumblr for my main book, Snark's always free and updated every morning. Newly added to Patreon is to become a member without paying. You'll get access to the same things on Tumblr, but on Patreon. Also new is a 1-week free Patreon trial, so be sure to check that out. Special thanks to Dawn, Phoebe, and Nikki for supporting me on Patreon already. If you want to hear your name in my video next week, either support me on Patreon or make a one-time donation. Do you like my snark so much that you want me to snark your writing? I do that too. For just $6 per chapter, I will tell you how awful that your writing is. But not to worry if you feel like you couldn't take the criticism. I also offer regular book editing as well, just $10 per chapter. You can contact me on any of my social media platforms if you have further questions. If you want to read some of the things that I've written, you can purchase my works on Amazon. I have a slew of spicy short stories and 2 full-length novels. I also frequently run flash sales on my stories, and if you don't follow me on any social media, you might want to do so just so you can know when I might be offering things for free. Links for everything will be posted below. See you next week, guys!